Welcome, everybody, to this, you know, I guess pretty lax talk that we're going to have tonight. My name's Conjur Akaris. I'm the Curatorial Program Manager at 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. Sorry, the traffic's going crazy outside my house, if you can all hear those motorbikes. I just want to say that I'm broadcasting from the land of the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and 4A is situated on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and just acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was, always will be Aboriginal land. If anyone else would like to share where they're broadcasting from, up to you. But,
Kabi land.
Gadigal land here.
I'm not sure, but it's close to the city centre, so it must be Gadigal.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks everyone. We're going to be talking, about for a digital, the 2021 program a little bit, focusing in on the work of Marcus Whale and Jane Fan. So Marcus, we sort of got him to write the initial piece for the year to serve as the quote unquote manifesto. It's a big word, so that's why I'll put it in quotes. And then working with, and Jane as well, and her perspective, she was the second commission after that, but I think she had a hand in a few others here and there, didn't you? Yeah, a little bit of insider knowledge. And we're joined by Marco Rinaldi, who is the curatorial assistant for a Digital 2021, and he's been a great help, great asset to the team. It's been really fun working with him. So I guess as a quick introduction, for a digital started last year. The first sort of piece we put out was in May last year, right when Sydney went into the first lockdown. And there wasn't really a curatorial focus. There wasn't a specific kind of mission, except for providing a platform for artists, writers, academics, whatever, to sort of, work on anything, whatever they wanted to, in a pretty lax platform away from, the White Cube or peer-reviewed journals of those kinds of things. But when we moved into 2021, I think we wanted to give it more focus and some more direction as a better way of, using the platform for what it is and what it could be and what we could achieve. And so working with Marco, we, developed a little curatorial rationale, if you'd like to speak about that.
Yeah, I guess from the outset for us, it was kind of trying to really look at working with artists that could create works that were for digital space to be consumed through the screen, and looking at things that could really only exist within digital space and be digested in that way. So it started with kind of just being around exploring what the limits of that are, like how far you can take that in different directions and different things that can be communicated through it. But also, and that's another reason why we have Marcus here, was that we really wanted to have an artwork that could kind of ground our whole vision for the project, that the artists afterwards could continue to respond back to and look out for reference. And that was great because it created a little bit of a visual identity for the project going forward, but also, really grounded the whole theme of what we wanted to do. So yeah.
I think some of the initial ideas that Marco and I talked about was sort of people's relationships with their screens and how they're changing and how they've changed over time, with a particular focus on the internet and web-based experiences. I am really into sort of web art from the 90s and all the weird kind of things that happened there. I wanted to bring some of that weirdness of using the internet back. Like when we had Web 1.0, it was this really kind of ramshackle, shanty town of websites that whatever, anyone could make anything. And you had to navigate it in a really weird way. But then once social media hit, everything just kind of got siphoned through one particular website, and it really shrunk the internet down, I suppose. And so we were going for some of those looks, those aesthetics, but also, focusing on coding and, interactivity with web pages. But also, I think the main thing was, I lost my train of thought. Highlighting like practitioners who can't make work for a physical gallery, or who have been, that's a challenge to curate those into kind of exhibitions, which I guess we'll talk to Jane about more. But I don't know, Marcus, would you like to kind of talk about what you responded to in the curatorial rationale, how your work came about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the work came about because you sent me an email, and
They also accosted you at Mary's Underground.
oh yeah. That also helps. Ironically, there was an in-person aspect to it too. But I think I also feel quite unable to respond in a compelling way to the way the internet and screen culture is today. And so for the piece, I was like I kind of have been recently generally, kind of trying to memorialize my early experiences on the internet and how they shaped my relationship with people and with social dynamics in general. So it became this sort of written work that then was turned into a sound work that was turned into a video with animated by Craig Stubbs Race. And it was to do with trying to capture that sense of play and fantasy and mystery and desire and kind of romance that I associated with chatting with other people on the internet when I was like pretty much prepubescent, in a way that felt really radical to me as a child, and which feels semi-impossible today because that kind of chaos and like unsupervised chaos doesn't seem so present. And so in that way, it's kind of more of I guess a nostalgic like reflection. And I think for sure is like by far the least interactive work in the 4A digital program.
But that's okay, because it set up everyone, it set the scene, so to speak.
And also, I still think that works. I think it was best experienced on your own. Like you experienced the way that it was like, your whole thinking was your interaction with the internet. And so by making people experience it through the screen on their own, it worked really well with the outcome. I think that kind of, because we did other animation works further in the program, but again, I feel like they still kind of existed outside of a gallery context. Like they do sort of rely on being on a screen and having that personal interaction with them adds another quality to it as well. So I think, yeah.
And I think a lot of Craig's choices in the animating of it were responding to a lot of the more fantastical language and the sort of atmospherics of the sound that maybe placed, or at least the intention of it was to place the viewer in this really imaginative space that's like kind of impossible and almost a bit ridiculous as well. That kind of harkens back to, I don't know, if you look at the sort of aesthetics of like internet optimism of the late 90s and the early 2000s, like, that stuff really dated so aggressively from that time, so quickly as well. And I think there's the reason partly is because it was like a sort of almost airheaded idealism. And I think by the time I got to the internet, by the time I started experiencing the internet in a really interactive way and changed people across the world who I didn't know, getting into online relationships with people I've never met to this day, it was already kind of like very much the realm of huge multinational corporations. So yeah, I think a lot of the fantasy of the work, of the writing and the work and the sound and the work was also from a place of being a child and not knowing how compromised the space was, I think.
It's nice that you mentioned nostalgia and brought that up, because that was sort of one of the initial thoughts and driving concepts I had behind the whole 4A Digital 2021 program, and the yearning for that early chaotic internet, as you mentioned. Like how sort of accurate did you find yourself going back into your own thoughts when writing the piece, or did you kind of imagine the scenario, or did you really truly relive 13-year-old Marcus Whale on DeviantArt?
No, I reckon it was like very hyper exaggerated. It's exaggerated. And I think part of that is this, I mean, what nostalgia is, which is a kind of like very, very much created in the present longing for the past. And I think it's always important to remember that it's from a place of dissatisfaction with the present, maybe, and a kind of longing for a sense of mystery and discovery. And I think it's also worth mentioning again that, like, the internet is a system that has always been like in a struggle between many different kind of motivations and agendas. Like in the first hypertext Project Xanadu, which invented in like 1960 something by Ted Nelson, that was like about that was about kind of the freedom of information and also like new ways of reading and thinking. And then of course the infrastructure of the internet as we know it today is like a military thing. So there's kind of like two real polar ends to like the sort of liberation and then on the other side, like kind of a like state apparatus. And I think it's interesting to see that, like, in the middle of this kind of stretch, there's always like a dynamic of tension between those two things that I think supports that I think I actually had to ignore in order to kind of access my sort of adolescent fantasies. And it's just like weird and uncanny to think that this sort of network is so compromised at all times.
Yeah, it's kind of the fact that it's never really been as safe or as free as you kind of want it to be, I suppose. Well, the more you learn now about the internet and even the history of it, it seems like a system that maybe we shouldn't be so trusting of, but it's how the world turns now. But this is kind of blind faith.
This is so about like every side of it is every side of it is compromised and also like fantastical and futuristic and beyond our imagination. And I think that's like, for me, the challenge in thinking about the internet today is just my complete inability to understand what it is because of how all-encompassing it was. And maybe it's easier to delve into my kind of adolescent experience because it felt so specific and so much easier to understand. It was like my way of escaping the sort of mundane experience of the world and a kind of way for me to find other people, and maybe not even other people, but just like the ideas of other people that might share interests of mine and might give the possibility of an encounter, while also kind of like training my brain to have huge dopamine hits every time I engage with a screen, in kind of a bionic way. So it's really I think that there's something so hard, unknowable, and intangible to the experience of the internet, which made it really impossible for me to do anything except be nostalgic.
Sure. I guess moving from that abstracted notion of, identifying and self-discovery through the internet. We'll move to Jane's, where a computer that's based on the internet literally tells you about yourself. So how is, what elements of the rationale did you respond to, Jane, and did you sort of, did you find Marcus's piece a way of inspiration for creating Cybermancy 2?
Yeah, so I guess I've taken a less idealistic route in creating my artwork. Like for me, I was sort of drawn to the concept in the initial, I guess the email that you sent me about how screens are between, our embodied experience and the, vast infinity of digital space. As an interactive artist, I'm interested in interfaces like screens because they are kind of like barriers to authentic human experience. Like, to give an example, like we take it for granted that we know how to use phones and keyboards and screens, but there's still a barrier to sort of like human experience. Like you can type and talk to someone, but there will be a chance of miscommunication, or you won't be able to capture that full experience. And then somewhere on the extreme end, we've got futuristic projects like Neuralace, where you can bypass the interface of language and then beam, your thoughts and feelings directly to another brain. So like brain to brain communication. And then somewhere in the middle is webcams, right? Because when the video is on, you're talking to one another, you can use the most natural interface that we have, which is speech, right? So for me, exploring these interfaces and trying to find new ways to use them in such a way where like what you're capable of doing and what is natural to you is used first. So like, that's why speech recognition technology is very popular, for example. And then when you're able to achieve that, you're able to achieve like human intimacy, right? So in Marcus's work, the webcam as an interface is very intimate because you're letting people see your face and your body. It's way better than describing things to one another. And then with that intimacy comes a certain kind of vulnerability. Like for me, using your face and reading your face and seeing it on your screen is a little bit uncomfortable or confronting, especially when it's passing judgment about you. So like I've, I guess, taken a little darker route and turned that intimacy into vulnerability so that you feel a little bit uncomfortable and you start to ask questions like, how does this thing do it? Why am I being judged? And, what is like, who writes this content and whatnot? So for me, yeah, screens are great, but like in my work, I love to be able to bring, you sort of make the interface more transparent so that you could come closer to the work, which is why with my past works, I've done lots of things to do with body tracking, with Connects and whatnot. I just love the concept of you see, a technology-based artwork, you don't necessarily need instructions to start interacting with it. So yeah, that's what I drew from the concept and from Marcus's work.
And so into Cybermancy 2, which is, judging by the title, and most of us know a sequel to, or kind of a spiritual sequel to a previous work. What kind of external influences did you bring into making that piece, and what was the creative process behind it?
So it's interesting because Cybermancy 1 came about because me and my friends were trying to put on a physical show, which was called Origin Parallels. Like we started a little collective that was called Origin, and it's like 4 or 5 of us, digital media / new media artists. And we had booked out the Kudos Gallery. And then the pandemic happened, and this was like a year in the planning. So we decided to put on a digital show in the interim. So that wasn't the work I was going to show for Origin Parallels, but I made it for this like online exhibition. So that's how it came about. And in terms of influences, I guess the first Cybermancy work I guess it's in the name, like very neon, very cyberpunk, even in its themes. It uses a similar mechanic where it reads your hand and gives you a bunch of targeted ads from fictional companies that I also generated with an AI. So yeah, it's like 3 kinds of AI in this work. And I just wanted to explore the concept of how willingly we give over our information and our privacy in exchange for entertainment. So I deliberately made it look very neon and very attractive and sort of fun to use, so that it comes at you sideways, and it's a bit you're a bit unsuspecting of what it could do. It's similar to Cybermancy 2, like it presents itself as face reading, but then it also reads your age and your gender. It gives you targeted information. So I guess, yeah, that's the cyberpunk sort of influence. And I guess the secondary influence I had, at least for Cybermancy 2, sort of a special take I took, knowing that I was going to be in a exhibition with other Asian artists and also the theme of the gallery. I decided to like draw in my own experiences as a Chinese Australian, sort of being a witness to 2 cultures, but also being subject to the pressure of both, sometimes, you know, with competing sort of goals I have to fulfill. So I wanted to draw in, marry the concept of, you know, things like social media anxiety or like body image, especially when it comes to young women, marry that with the concept of Chinese face reading and also gender roles that you have to fulfill in the traditional Chinese society, like, you know, be married by a certain age and do XYZ, like into this work where it's like sort of like this crazy collision of both. So that's why I decided to use fortune telling elements in it, because face reading was traditionally used to determine how suitable you were to marriage, especially for young women, by judging your facial features. Like, you know, if she has a big mouth, she's prone to gossip, and all this kind of thing. So like it has new packaging, but it's really an old problem.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I like that idea. It's an old problem with new packaging. I guess, like, I'm not too sure. Like, have you sort of revisited the piece since you've looked at it? Like, how do you reflect on it? Because it was a while ago now. That was an even, you know, another lockdown ago. So it's like, yeah, where do you kind of go from here in your practice? What would you like to achieve from here?
Yeah, so haven't
Like
given it
revisiting similar ideas, I mean, or?
Haven't yet given it too much thought, but I've already been invited to the next gig with my honors lecturer, who's Deborah Tillman. She's doing another sort of technology focused show. So I have to think about, her concept is about, it's a little bit similar to this one, which is exposing the physical infrastructures that make our digital world possible. So like, you know, server farms, Amazon Turks, which is like people who, you know, do the process that should be automated of moderating content, all this kind of invisible stuff. So yeah, I guess I've been thinking about it in terms of that, maybe taking less software approach. At the same time though, I'd like to point out that not all my work is supposed to be so anxiety inducing. Like I have some works where, like, yes, technology is involved, but I'm sort of taking a less, you know, paranoid or critical approach to it. So I guess it would be good to also explore that, I guess, the more idealistic aspects of technology and art in the future as well.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear sort of Marcus and Marco's thoughts on this, but like, where do you kind of see these forms of art going in the future, and Jane as well? Like, where's the longevity of digital art when people are opening back up? How does it get shown in a gallery? I think these are questions that Marco and I have tried to wrangle with in this project.
Yeah. Well, I hope it sticks around, and we're gonna try and make it stick around. But I think that they're now, as things open up and we've become so accustomed to it, I think that there could be there's an interesting possibility to look at like hybrid models between digitally created spaces like the ones that we've created, and then how they can exist within physical spaces, but almost creating an experience where it doesn't matter whether you experience it digitally or physically. Like there are elements to it being exhibited in a physical space, but it has the same sort of weight to it, or maybe it's different. I don't know, but do you know what I mean? Like being able to communicate them within both spaces and transfer them across would be really interesting. And I also just like think it's really exciting. And what we've tried to do with the program is like add value to this type of practice, and so that it's actually like considered like an artistic exploration in a feasible way. Like I think it would be really exciting if it could be possible for people to sustain a practice through these types of interactions. And whether that means going forward, I'm not sure, but that's something that we're kind of looking towards for next year with the program.
One of the big things that we talked about, Marco, was like was agency, and being in control of the viewing experience. We often talked about like walking in halfway through to a video work in the gallery, and then one of the strengths of presenting work in this fashion is that people can access it in their own way, in their own time, in their own home. And I guess that's sort of, did you kind of consider those forms of agency and interaction when you were making your piece, Marcus? Because your sound was very ASMR.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for sure, it was something that I was thinking of as being a kind of one-to-one experience, and a domestic experience as well. I kind of wanted it to feel like you were almost on the other side of the screen from me, with this pretty ludicrous kind of interface of the animation. Yeah, and of course it was like, I'm also not really from a visual art world, so I've never really been able to contend properly with this idea of a video work which you walk in on partway through and then leave before it's finished. I've never really known how I could make anything like that, that works in that way. So it was always meant to be a kind of like short thing that you could set, hopefully set 6 minutes aside to listen and watch. Yeah, for sure. And I think I'm also really attracted to platforms like Prototype, which curates video works that are kind of presented on a irregular schedule, and they're designed to just be watched start to finish, kind of just like a film, really. And I think there's a lot of possibility for that, if we allow ourselves to use the internet to watch videos, because we do anyway. Like why not make it possible to see a video? I mean, I have this problem often also where I'm thinking about something that I've seen in a gallery and I can't access it anymore. Even performances as well. I mean, it's a different issue. And the idea of something being permanently viewable on the internet is attractive to me. I mean, it's a pretty kind of like straightforward, mundane, practical thing, but I liked the idea that it would be just a video on. I mean, it's on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah, the biggest archive in the world.
Totally, like it couldn't be more everyday than that.
But in terms of like, I think one of the things you're talking about was longevity. That's very interesting to me as well. I think I do have a big contention with things appearing and disappearing. But then obviously that comes with its own ecological problems, which,
Yeah.
Rel looked at in his video with his massive server farms and everything like that. It's just, where do you guys think about sort of the longevity of digital works in that way, and where can we go from here? Is it a viable practice, or will people ecologically lambast having server works?
I think a little bit about MySpace with this because, sorry, I'm coming with some real like normie takes, but MySpace was for a short time, a huge archive, like YouTube is, of music. And it was kind of when I was 16, 17, that was how I discovered music, was just by going to people's MySpace pages. And then all of that was lost accidentally at some point. And I think that kind of like goes to show, at least, that it's the idea, the feeling of permanence is pretty illusory, and something that, everything has to be maintained in the present, both in a physical way as well. So much of the music that I've ever released is not available. I don't have it. It's not on anything that I can access. It's not on the internet anymore. Even though there's this, I think, deluded notion that it's that it is permanent, to kind of like contradict myself from before.
But that's okay. I think, look, I just lost my hard drive on my laptop, so I get that idea of permanence and impermanence.
I think it's so interesting to think about it in that way, though, because there's something so intangible about the internet. But when we talk about like works being mounted in the internet, we consider them to be like, if that's what the project is about, we consider them to be, like you were saying, you could access them forever. But at the same time, it all feels so intangible. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's meant to ground it, but it could at any point disappear because we don't have it in front of us physically. And so, like, I don't know, that overlap is just so interesting to me.
It's like, Jane, how do you back up your artwork?
So got some interesting takes on
this. What
this.
happens if GitHub goes down?
I also have an interesting answer to that. So GitHub's answer to that is actually the Arctic Vault, which is to print out code on transparent reels of, I was going to say film, but it's tape. And you can see the actual code, like all the letters being written out in that long reel. And they've been backing up people's code. So like they've been sampling different users. So they've actually picked me. So my code is somewhere in that Arctic Vault. It's a sort of like backup plan for humanity in case everything goes wrong, or maybe for the aliens, I don't know. But I guess the other thing about it is the fact that it is ephemeral a problem at all? Because for me, like I've noticed that, technology-based art has been around since, any kind of technology has been a thing. Like in the 60s, when the first computers came out, they still had shows like Cybernetic Serendipity, where they tried to showcase that stuff. But it has trouble finding itself into traditional galleries because it's very difficult to create art objects out of them and sell them. So all you're left with is an experience, and you can sell experiences, right? That's why concerts are such a big thing. But I sort of like that aspect of digital art being ephemeral, like it could be lost at any time. The only cost is that if you don't record it in some more permanent medium, that aspect of human culture gets lost to the ages, and that's a bit unfortunate. Pros and cons to both.
So your work is in the GitHub Great Library of Alexandria, essentially.
I don't know which one it is, but like more than half my code that's public at least is art. So at least some kind of art got into the vote, I think.
I guess an even more nebulous question then is the code the art, or is the experience the art?
This
I'm sorry for saying that.
it's difficult to answer. For some works, the answer is yes to both because they showcase the code at the forefront. So I'm thinking of generative musicians like who are like literally coding on the command line. So the code is the art. But for me, code is just the medium and not necessarily the experience or artwork. Like I could make it out of anything. I could, like SolarWit, give someone a piece of paper with instructions to do it. But the piece of paper is not the artwork. It's the output that's the artwork. And that's what the code is. It's that piece of paper.
So you need the record, I suppose. Look, just from an archivist perspective. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of like the strengths and opportunities of screen-based works, like the ones in 4A Digital and things that have been made? What can they do for audiences? What can they do for the art community and ecology, do you think? Open to everyone.
I guess my one regret with the web-based works that I've done so far was that I didn't actually leverage the power of the web properly. And the power of the web is networking, right? Being able to, for many users to add their data and for that data to be shown to people. So like forums are a simple text-based form of that. So a lot of my artworks can actually be installed physically and it wouldn't change the experience so much other than the fact that multiple people are experiencing it at a time. So I feel like if we want to like work on this medium, we have to work on sort of like things that seem obvious, but like the strengths of the internet is actually being able to talk and network with one another.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's something that I've been thinking about with us, like approaching our curation for next year, which is sort of related to what you're saying. But I thinking about how like the program that we have at the moment was created mostly individual artists. Obviously, Marcus's was a collaboration between Marcus and Craig, but looking at artists who don't necessarily know how to code but have concepts for digital space, and then like working with coders to like develop them, or looking at ways of like creating like infinite sort of interactive spaces like Callum's, but then inside that hosting works by artists who haven't necessarily create like a video work or an animation or something. So like using the digital space as a way of collaborating across mediums as well, and like looking at how people from different and multidisciplinary backgrounds can like collaborate to create something. If you imagine like an infinite like room and there's just like rooms that you can walk through and you can experience like a whole bunch of different things, I think that would be a really cool direction to go in.
Yeah. I can't wait to see what we do with that. No, I can't wait.
Yeah. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that Q&A is available from the audience, but no one's asked any questions, which I'm a bit sad about. But that's okay. Well then, yeah, I don't know. If no one's got any questions or wants to really hear anything from us, how do you guys feel about leaving the conversation there? Thinking about the possibilities for the future. Beautiful.
Yeah, my only thought when Marco mentioned that concept is thinking back to my teenage years, the thing I loved was metaverses, and I really think Facebook doesn't deserve that title of a metaverse, but things like Second Life, where like people have modeled the entire university campus on it, or they've like added weird games, people like dress up in strange avatars like that. Like, I guess that stage of the internet was a really cool time, and I would really love to relive it in a project like that.
See, it's that nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's the weird 2000s internet.
It's still around. Like, you've got VR chat, right?
It's true. It's a very strange place. in terms of Q&A, Celine is asking, hey Jane, what's the name of the show, upcoming show that you're going to be in?
Don't know if it has a name yet. It's not even been made official yet.
Great.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I might, if you follow my Instagram, I might post about it. I might link it in the chat.
And we've got another question from Sophia Alice asking, were there any other organizations or models that Foray Digital was based off? I didn't really think of anything. I don't want to like toot my own horn, but no, I'm sure there was some things, you know, rattling around in the back of our heads, but I don't think we looked at any organization or, you know, curatorial model in particular for this. I think we just both sort of saw an opportunity and wanted to work with a bunch of artists that we would never normally work with in a physical gallery space.
Yeah. I think like curating for this space is like interesting and like a bit challenging at the start as well, because it hasn't really been done in the same, I mean, it definitely has been, but in a way it doesn't have like databases that exist with just like artists that create creative coding pieces that you can interact with, like a sort of thing. So finding them was like quite challenging and trying to think of interesting ways of sourcing artists and kind of going in blind, but basing it off that framework of being like, what are things that we can create for digital space that are interactive and who creates them, and try and find them.
It didn't seem like there was much of a precedent set either for this kind of, you know, commissioning model that we went for. So we really, like, I think we learned a lot when we were doing it. We had to learn what GitHub is used for, and like how to use it. I know I had to ask like Callum Howard, who did one of the works, that like, how do I fork something? Like I had to ask him like 3 times on how to do that, and I'm sure if I do it again, I'll have to check another guide. But learning these kinds of things has really, I think, not necessarily future-proofed our practice, but it's definitely helped in ways of integrating. And I don't know, I hope more people take notice because it was fun and it was interesting.
Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, I actually just thought of a question, Jane, which was like seeing, I know that you worked on the backbone of a few of the other works. And I guess I'm just interested in like what your opinion is on kind of the exchange of ideas within creative coding, and like you as being like a practicing artist who creates these types of pieces, like how you view coding someone else's like work, and like if, you know, if we are looking to work with coders to create artworks for other artists, should we be looking for people who don't have necessarily that, like a creative agency or a practice of their own, and will just work on the backbone based on a direction? Or if like you think that they do sort of need to do you know what I mean? Have like an artistic practice in order to be able to understand like where that would sort of lie.
Yeah, so yeah, this is a challenging problem because for context, I'm a software engineer, so I write code for other people in my day to day, but it's like relatively vanilla website stuff. So I feel like you don't necessarily need a deep like technical understanding to come up with great concepts that need the assistance of technology. It's challenging to source people who can help you realize that vision, because while there are many, you know, coders, software engineers, whatever you'd like to call them out, sometimes they're sort of very geared into the focus of creating traditional products. So trying to get them to understand the artist's vision, to help them realize it, maybe think really left field and like pull in technologies that, you know, sort of remix them in ways that they're not intended to use, makes it difficult. And I know that at least with UNSW, there used to be an interactive art major that sort of helped train up some of these people, but that has since been shut down, so I'm a little bit sad. But Sydney Uni's also got a creative coding type of course as well. Like for me, I feel like there should be more of us. And I feel like with the ones who are traditional engineers, maybe it would help them to sort of open their minds to this kind of practice, but it's not really well the gateways to this discipline, they're not very easy to find, and they're very fragmented. Like, for example, I found a society of like creative coders that were associated with Canva, but I have no access to them. I know my crew of like UNSW grads who do creative coding stuff, but then it's now very insular to them. It'd be great if we could all find each other and actually help each other, like, you know, develop this artistic community, and then also help other artists with great concepts to realize their visions if they're lacking in, you know, technical skills. So yeah, my answer is give me more.
Yeah.
I guess Marcus was kind of on the flip side of that, in that he wrote one part and then had to put a lot of trust in Craig. How was that?
Really, really fine. I mean, it's a lot more straightforward than I think, you know, because it's simply just make video for this sound thing I did. But I think it's always enjoyable to divest some of the like ownership over creation generally. I think it makes it a more interesting experience for everyone viewing and making it. And you know, maybe in some ways, like being able to interface in an artwork, which I've never made anything interactive, really. I think there's something like kind of utopian in the possibility of a very large number of people in some way contributing to a work. So my kind of answer was like, I just deliberately like didn't give Craig any direction, and wanted it to feel like we were all had kind of agency in the creative process.
Right. I wanted to bring up something about like collarbones, but I'll leave that for another time.
Okay.
But we have one last question, I guess, if people are fine with what time. And it's from Nula Furtado. What does the intersection of digital works of this nature and NFTs look like? Someone had to mention them.
I'm waiting for that. I'm primed.
Jane, have you sold any? Have you sold any works as NFTs?
No, but I did consider it, and I do know some friends who've made NFTs. Like for me, it's kind of a very curious phenomenon, because I've been making. So I started off as an illustrator before I did all this like technology art stuff. So I was making digital images and selling them to people on a case-by-case basis, and like, you know, realizing their specific character, D&D characters as well. You mentioned that. And to me, it almost looks like it's a bit of the old art world creeping into this new space, because in the traditional art world, you buy art objects. You don't even ever have to see your art object. It just stays in a vault, and then you sign a piece of paper and you transfer ownership. That's basically what an NFT is, except that you're able to see it on the internet. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. I'm not sure if it's going to stick around for long, but maybe I'm wrong. Like for me, the power of technology-based art is not in the ownership, but in experiences. So if NFTs happen to be part of that, that's great. But if it's just trading cards, I'm not too interested.
Yeah, and that's what it seems like to me at this point, but maybe I'm wrong, but probably could do some more research. But it just seems kind of like another cryptocurrency, but it just has a beautiful face.
I would say that one of my friends, Pat Eunice, actually managed to marry the concept of NFTs and creating unique experiences together in one of his works. So I know it's possible. So I'm not ruling it out right now.
I'm not convinced on the interactivity of NFTs with creative experiences necessarily. I think in the way that Nula's thinking. I think in terms of what they're going to be used for, and this is maybe quite cynical, is just as a show of wealth in
Mm.
cyberspaces.
Mm.
Like, look at me. I've got however many ether worth of JPEGs. And you can see it on the blockchain. Like,
Yeah, I just see it as like a exchange.
yeah, like there's obviously online experiences you can tailor around seeing these images, but I think those are sort of, ways of using and presenting digital art that Marco and I think no one else would be particularly interested in. It seems a bit base level. But, that's the kind of people who buy NFTs. Marcus, what about exclusive recordings as NFTs?
I think I would never do it.
I hope you can be like, I'm gonna make some money.
I mean, unless it was no. I think there's something to me. Okay, like to me, it feels like very similar to how the art market works and art objects bought and sold. And it kind of just exposes the perversity of the kind of this kind of very made up exchange value that it sort of highlights. It sort of just supercharges this like capitalist notion of an object having worth outside of its use, and I think that it just feels perverse to me. I'm like, again, like I'm such a layman with all of this stuff, but it feels perverse to me because, again, going back to the original hypertext project, Xanadu, being about like the freedom, and like the liberation of knowledge and information and experiences of the world. This seems like you're taking the possibility of being able to duplicate things infinitely and saying, no, actually, we need to make this as limited as possible for only those who are wealthy enough. And so it seems pretty dystopian to me generally.
Great point to end on. I will say that at least it's easier for provenance for when galleries in the future have NFTs. No one's going to be complaining about stolen artifacts and Elgin Marvel's problems with NFTs because it's all on there.
Lol, yeah. Yeah, true.
But anyway, well, yeah, thanks everyone for your time. I think we'll stop it there.
Cool.
But yeah, thanks Jane and Marcus for joining us, and Marco for all his help on the project. This is being recorded, so if anyone in attendance wants to share this out, please do, for people who didn't see it. And yeah, we'll obviously be posting it online, things like that for you to share. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Have a good evening.